The frozen surface of K-92 stretched endlessly beneath a sky devoid of stars. Dr. Elias Carter adjusted his helmet visor and stared at the vast, lifeless landscape. What made this moon unique wasn't the extreme cold. It was something far more disturbing. There was no sound. His heavy boots pressed into the ice, but no crunch echoed back. The radio worked fine, but the environment absorbed all noise. No reverberation, no echoes, nothing. It was as if the very air refused to carry sound. Behind him, Aurora 7, the research station, loomed like a skeletal husk against the dark horizon. Amelia, the mission's lead scientist, gestured for him to come inside. Within the station, at least there was an artificial reverberation system, a comforting imitation of sound behaving normally. "We're running the ultrasonic test today," Amelia said. Elias nodded. The theory was simple. If they could understand why sound vanished here, they might unlock a fundamental new law of physics. At the entrance of a nearby ice cave, they set up the sound emitter. A pulse was sent. Nothing returned, no echo, no feedback. Then the lights flickered. For a moment, Elias felt something shift inside the cave. Something had woken up. Elias frowned, adjusting the transmitter panel. The equipment should have picked up something, but the response was the same as before. Nothing. "Maybe a sensor glitch?" suggested Jonas, one of the audio technicians, as he studied the data. "I don't think so," Elias muttered. "I want to test again." Jonas grabbed a handheld recorder and stepped into the cave, his white thermal suit disappearing into the pitch-black void. "Testing microphone placement," Jonas said over the radio. His voice came through clearly in Elias's earpiece. But in the cave itself, there was no natural echo, no reverberation off the ice, no return sound of any kind. Amelia was reviewing sensor data when the lights flickered again. "Elias, something is interfering with our systems," she said, her voice tight with unease. Then Jonas went silent. Elias clicked his radio. "Jonas, do you copy?" Nothing. Amelia quickly adjusted the motion sensors. A small anomaly appeared, a disturbance in the air, something moving where nothing should be. Then the radio crackled, and for the briefest moment they heard something. A distorted whisper. "Jonas," Elias called out. No response. He and Amelia rushed into the cave's entrance. Jonas was gone. Only his recorder remained, lying on the ice. The device was still on, still recording. Elias pressed play. There was nothing but silence. The ice reflected the pale glow of their flashlights as Elias and Amelia stood at the cave's entrance, their breath fogging up their visors. Jonas couldn't have just vanished. "Maybe he went deeper inside," Amelia suggested, though her voice was uncertain. Elias knelt and picked up the handheld recorder. The display was still active, still recording, but when he replayed the last moments, there was nothing. No footsteps, no struggling, not even Jonas breathing. Back at the station, the rest of the team gathered, their faces tight with fear. The motion sensors still detected movement inside the cave. The problem was, the cameras showed nothing. "This doesn't make sense," Amelia murmured, scrolling through the sensor logs. Elias wasn't listening. He was running Jonas's final recording through an audio analyzer. That's when he noticed the gaps, small, unnatural pauses in the sound. It was like something had cut pieces out of the recording. He boosted the frequency range. A faint, unnatural static emerged. Then, within the white noise, something shifted. A breath. The hair on the back of Elias's neck stood up. Then, alarms blared throughout the station. On the security feed, one of their team members, Dawson, stood frozen in the outer corridor. He was shaking, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with terror. Elias and Amelia rushed to him. "Dawson, what happened?" Elias demanded. Dawson moved his lips, but no sound came out, and then he was gone. No flash, no movement, no distortion. 1 second he was there. The next, there was nothing. Something had erased him. The silence in the room deepened, and this time Elias could feel it watching. Elias stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he had just seen. Dawson didn't run, he didn't scream, he didn't even resist. He was just gone. Amelia's breathing was shallow beside him. This isn't possible," she whispered. Elias snapped back to reality and bolted to the control room. If Dawson and Jonas had vanished, there had to be something in the data, some explanation. What he found was worse than anything he had imagined. Aurora 7 was not the first mission to K-92. Buried deep in the system's classified files were logs from a previous expedition, sent 2 years ago. There was no official record of what happened to them, just an incomplete final report. And an audio file. Elias hesitated before pressing play. At first, only static, then hushed, frantic whispers. "The silence, it hears us. Don't make too much noise, but don't stay quiet for too long. If you can, don't let the silence grow. Oh God, it's here." The recording cut off. Elias felt his stomach drop. "They knew," he muttered. "They knew the whole time." Amelia had pulled up another file. It was a sound wave analysis of K-92's environment. Her face was pale as she pointed to a pattern forming in the data. Silence was supposed to be random, but here it wasn't. It had a rhythm, a pulse, like a signal, like language, and the silence was expanding. Elias swallowed hard, his ears ringing with the oppressive absence of sound. Something was listening, and now it was closer. The station's lights flickered. Then they died completely. For a moment, there was nothing but complete, suffocating darkness and silence. Elias held his breath. He could feel Amelia standing next to him, her body tense. But beyond that, nothing. Then something moved. It wasn't a sound, not exactly. More like a shifting absence, a void rearranging itself in the air. A single emergency light flickered to life, casting long, erratic shadows. And then they saw it. At the far end of the corridor, something impossible stood, a twisting, amorphous mass that absorbed the light around it. It wasn't solid, but it wasn't transparent either. It was like looking at a wound in reality itself. Then the eyes opened. Dozens of them. Black, empty, bottomless. They blinked independently, twisting and shifting across the creature's surface as if searching for something unseen. And then it looked at them. Amelia took a step back. Her breathing hitched. That was all it took. The smallest sound, a panicked inhale, and the creature moved. It didn't rush toward her, it didn't lunge, it simply wasn't there anymore. And then, neither was Amelia. There was no scream, no impact, just silence. 1 second, she was next to Elias. The next, she was gone. Elias staggered backward, his pulse hammering in his ears. The thing loomed in the darkness, shifting, pulsating, growing. And then it clicked. The old recordings, the missing pieces of sound, the expanding silence. It wasn't tracking noise. It was tracking silence. If someone stayed quiet for too long, if they let the silence settle, that's when it found them. Elias's breath came in shallow gasps as he backed toward the control panel. His mind raced. If silence was the invitation, then maybe The creature's eyes locked onto him. No time to think, no time to hesitate. He turned and ran. Behind him, the silence collapsed in on itself, chasing him like a tidal wave. He had one last chance. He had to make noise. Elias sprinted down the corridor, his breath ragged. The silence was right behind him, a crushing, growing vacuum that erased everything it touched. The control room was just ahead. He threw himself inside and slammed the door shut. It wouldn't hold for long. His fingers trembled as he accessed the system. The escape pod's ignition, that was his only chance. But the moment he activated it, the roar of the engines would give away his position. He needed a distraction. Elias's eyes darted to the station's audio system, the speakers that ran through every hallway. A thought struck him. The old mission logs, the last voices of the lost crew. He tapped into the audio archive and played the final recordings at full volume. Static filled the speakers, then whispers. The silence. It hears us. Don't stay quiet, but don't make too much noise. It's coming. Oh God, it's coming. Elias didn't wait to hear the rest. He bolted from the control room and ran toward the launch bay. The security cameras flickered. In one of them, he saw the creature writhing, its mass distorting as if confused by the sudden burst of sound. For the first time, it hesitated. Elias reached the pod, his hands shaking as he began the launch sequence. Then, the security feed went black. The creature had stopped chasing the voices. It had turned toward him, and now it knew exactly where he was. Elias punched the launch button. The engines roared to life, and the creature lunged. The escape pod launched, its engines roaring through the station. For the first time, Elias heard true noise. The deep rumble of the thrusters, the metallic groan of the airlock separating, the rapid thump of his own heartbeat. And the creature screamed. It wasn't a sound, not exactly. It was a void, an absence of everything. The silence struck like a shockwave, making his ears ring, his vision blur. The pod shot into the dark void of space, breaking free from K-92's gravity. The planet shrank behind him, the research station becoming nothing more than a speck in the frozen landscape. Elias sagged against the seat, his chest rising and falling in uneven gasps. He had survived. But then, the radio crackled. A soft, rhythmic static filled the small cabin. Then a voice. You brought the silence with you. The transmission cut out. Elias stared at the radio, his throat dry. Then, deep in the ship's interior, he heard something else. Not static, not an echo, a breath. Long. Slow. Right behind him. Elias closed his eyes. The silence was still here, and it was waiting.